before we actually start with the artists, I want to thank the exhibition sponsor, Pinnacle Bank. It's because of them that we were able to put this show together, and we're very grateful. And I want to thank our ArtWise sponsor, Martha Mackey, who is here somewhere, so we can say, yay, Martha, thank you so much. I also want to mention that the Hunter Invitational, although it's a recurring series for the museum, this year's presentation is part of the Tennessee Triennial. And the Triennial is a statewide celebration of the visual arts in Tennessee. And this is Chattanooga's weekend, so go check out all the visual arts this weekend, the art crawl, all the things. And of course, thank you for coming here for ours. So we have 4 artists speaking tonight from the Invitational. I'm going to introduce all of them. And I'm also going to introduce a 5th who's not speaking because she's hanging out. Anna Carl, raise your hand. Yay. Anna will be speaking on April 9th with Jerusha Graham and Craig Drennan. So I hope you come back for that. But I'm going to tell you about a little bit about each of the 4 people speaking tonight, and then we're just going to kind of work around the room with them. If you have questions, please ask them as we go. So we have Amie Esslinger, who we're standing in front of her amazing installation that she designed for us. Amie is from Atlanta and has a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Georgia State University. She has exhibited at the David Sensor CDC Museum, the Center for Disease Control, and you can see that her work might be inspired by cellular processes. She's also exhibited at the Michael C. Carlos Museum at Emory and at Vanderbilt University. And she will tell you a bit about her process and inspiration. And Katie Hargrave is a professor at the University of Tennessee, and she's chair of the art department. And her collaborator could not be here today, Meredith Laura Lynn, who is a professor at Florida State, and she's in Tallahassee, so that's why she is not here right now. But the 2 of them met at graduate school and have been working collaboratively, and they explore the impact that we've had historically on so-called public lands and the people who have lived there, and the continuing impact that we have on it. Their work has been exhibited across the country, including the University of Wyoming Museum of Art, the Crisp Ellert Art Museum, the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, and the Atlanta Contemporary. And of course here, so we're thrilled to have you here. Corinne is also here from Atlanta. She was a tenured professor at the Atlanta College of Art, where she taught for 20 years. Corinne has received the prestigious Guggenheim Fellowship and the Fulbright Hays Travel Grant, and her work has also been exhibited quite widely. And I don't know if any of you saw her 40-piece work exhibit just now at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Georgia, but it was pretty amazing. Her work is in the collection of the High Museum, the Museum of Art and Science in Macon, Georgia, and the Nasher at Duke University. Althea's work is in the other gallery, and she's a professor at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville in the printmaking department since 2010. Obviously, she's here from Knoxville. Althea received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from Spelman College and has 2 Master of Fine Arts. You are an overachiever. Yes, one from Purdue University and one from Tyler School of Art at Temple University. She has exhibited not only across the US, but internationally, and is in the collection of the Huntsville Museum of Art, the Knoxville Museum of Art, and the British Museum. So we are so thrilled that all of you are here, and all of the artists are here. So I'm going to turn it over to Amie, and then she'll pass it to Katie.
I'm Amie, Atlanta, you got that biography, but I do installation work. I also have done paintings that I like to every once in a while start up, but mostly I do these large-scale installation pieces. I'm using a lot of different material, kind of whatever falls into my lap. I live and work in my home, so I have a very rich amount of materials to draw from because I am what I call a pre-hoarder. Not quite, I'm an organized pre-hoarder. So I like to keep a lot of things near me. So I'm using beads and paper and canvas. I'm doing embroidery, I'm painting, I'm using application tubes. I'm mixing some of my paints, I'm making handmade paper. I'm constructing from wood panels, cutting from foam core to give pieces structure. I'm very interested in the sculptural components as much as the flat painting parts. And it is made of all of these different components that come off and are installed in pieces. So it's site responsive. So every time I install it, there's a new iteration. When the work is based on, I don't like to give too much information, but enough that I use a lot of cellular life forms in a very abstract way. So I'm thinking a lot about, yes, some microbiology, but mostly what I think I'm focusing on now is the tension in chaos, in order. And I'm seeing mutations. I'm seeing the ramifications of mutations, thinking about what's going on in our bodies, how little things, unseen things can have huge repercussions. So it's the tension we all live in. It's part of being on the planet. So I work in detail, and I'm building out small pieces. And so people always ask me what I had planned when I put up a piece. So this was about a year's work, plus some older pieces are integrated in it. But I'm hyper detail focused, so I really am just making batches of work. And then I have some larger ideas that I hold in the back of my head, and then they're integrated. So it's chaotic and probably too boring to talk about, but the chaos all comes together. Yeah, so again, lots of different materials. I grew up I think is interesting, my background is I grew up with self-taught artist parents, and then I have an art degree, so I have a bit of do-it-yourself and some more formal training mixed together, and I think that's merged into the work. But I grew up with a lot of like self-taught art. Color and scale obviously is something I focus on. I'm a big lover of glitter, and I won't apologize. I love hot pinks. I also love very dirty, muddy, earthy colors, and just merging all of those together. Yeah.
Can you talk about those little white squares in the middle?
The toast.
They just grab my attention right at the beginning, and you describe the layering, and I just thought that would be nice.
Sure. Oh, thanks. Okay, so those were the first things I made starting this project. It is a drywall tape that's kind of has a grid-like structure to it. And I made the paper pulp, and then encased in each one of those is a little cellular form. And then I added oils, there's ink, there's acrylic paint on top. But it was like the ceremonial part of the project that I started, but it was like an encasement of these cells, and that's why it's a little bit different from the rest of the work. But I do love a handmade paper. So I use actually all of my paper scraps are saved and made back into paper. But that has to be a big process. So I had all of this all these scraps from framing. So it's whatever that goes in framing. Anyway, it's cotton rag paper.
What's your filing system like? Do you have like a bunch of drawers?
Shelves, clear plastic bins, and then the big file cabinets, and I'm packed in. Every once in a while, I'll go and do a major overhaul, and I feel very in control of my world, and then it escapes me, like always. But one of the things that I thought was interesting that's very obvious that was pointed out to me was the issue of control. And I am a severe control freak of a very specific kind. And so it's all put into the work. I don't have any help, probably because I wouldn't accept it, but also I like that my hand has touched everything. There's no technology machines. It's all of my mistakes, all the successful parts worked out together. So, but if you work every day, then you can make a big crazy thing. Go ahead.
How many hours do you work a day?
It depends on my schedule. So usually about a 5-hour day, but adjusted for projects. So might be a get up before the sun work kind of thing. So, but yeah, I have small children, so that's put a damper on the studio time because they need so much. So, but that's also why I have a home studio, is I can switch back and forth.
Did you start something like this with a bit of a sketch, or did you start in the middle of working?
When I first started Installation Works, I kind of, so what I was doing, I was doing paintings, and then I cut out a little piece, and then I really liked it, and I took them out, and then I started on the wall, and then it's grown more and more. But I used to do sketches, but I kind of, these things like work their way out in the moment. So for this piece, I knew the big canvas pieces. I wanted to use this corner, and so that was in my mind, but everything else was up for grabs. Also, I didn't know if this was gonna work, so I had a backup plan in it, and I used to lose a lot of sleep over installation, but I don't even feel very responsible for how it turns out. I just know it will, so far, work out on site. There is an aerial view and also a micro view that can play off of one another. That's why I don't like to be too representative of the creatures I've looked at in the past. So lots of like bacteria. I used to really love viruses, but we all kind of crashed out on viruses. So yeah, okay. Thank you.
My collaborator, Meredith, and I have been working together for 8 years, and we make work that is thinking about who feels at home in the outdoors. All of us have experience in some ways outside, and we have made work throughout those 8 years that is thinking about our place as individuals within the so-called public lands, within the spaces that this country has set aside for us. And the tensions that are in those spaces. Meredith and I both love national parks, and 8 years ago we took a long road trip together and stopped at 8 different national parks across the trip. And one of the things that was very interesting is that all of the different park rangers had very different interpretation styles. And we actually met one park ranger who was an art professor in Texas during the year. And then over the summer, he went to Wyoming to be a park ranger, which is like my dream job. I look forward to that in the future. And that really changed the way that we thought about our work, because we wanted to think about interpretation and what kinds of stories are told in these places that we might hold dear or feel sacred in, and so on. And we started making work that was reflecting on that. And in 2020, became obsessed with the television show Alone. So as many of us were at home, we were binging on reality television. And I don't know if any of you have watched the show Alone, but the shtick is that there are contestants who are truly alone. So they are dropped in the wilderness. They have about 5 square miles, and they're expected to try to survive for as long as possible. And it's full of fools. All of the people who are on that show, with the exception of 1 or 2 every season, really has no business being in the outdoors. You know, an example is someone who finds an animal bone. This guy is from Kentucky. He finds an animal bone, he sharpens it, he makes a stick and poke tattoo with berries that he can't identify, and shocker, he gets ill and has to be medevaced out and loses. We identified with that because we are also fools in the outdoors. Maybe the reason we feel like fools is because we have not been acculturated to feel like we are confident outside. So I didn't grow up hiking. That's something I learned later in life. I didn't grow up camping. And so anytime I do it, oftentimes there's a young man who is there, this is a true story, who might say, oh, can I help you set up your tent? And I've set up tents in many, many states. I don't need help setting up my tent, but that gives you an example of that experience. And so Meredith and I, as we watched more about the show, we really thought it was a rich cultural text. And one reason for that is that they are alone. And we have this myth that people can and should survive in the wilderness. And of course, that is a very Eurocentric idea of the outdoors. But another part of it is that they're filming themselves. So they have to go through a whole film school experience in order to shoot the footage. And as artists, that became very interesting to us to think about how art has become a part of the way in which we experience the outdoors and how we think about wilderness. And in some instances, how artists are kind of instrumentalized in the project of settler colonialism as it relates to the outdoors. So this body of work is looking at the idea of trying to find something in the wilderness. And so the video piece is shot all in Wyoming at Flaming Gorge. And on the show, people bring a photo from home. And so we brought a photo from one of our favorite 19th century artists and outdoorsmen, William Henry Jackson. And we thought we were going to have to pretend to find this site, that it was going to be very easy for us to find it, unlike the contestants who can never find water, they can never find food or anything like that. We thought we were going to have to fake it. But in fact, it was actually very difficult because the landscape has been changed by dams and roads and so on. So it took us 3 trips and lots and lots of research and schlepping to be able to find it. Part of the project that we do is to look at those 18th and 19th century outdoorsmen, and we call them bad outdoorsmen, who there's something about what they do that is questionable. And so all of this work is all based on 2 artists who were a part of a U.S. geological survey, the Hayden expedition. So this piece and this one are both William Henry Jackson photographs. And these are all photographs that are lesser known, where there's more than one individual in them. So they're explicitly not alone out in the wilderness. And then the piece behind me is a recreation of Thomas Moran painting that we have laser cut leaves out of it. So they are all little small oak leaves that have been laser cut and layered. And as that process that we use within our work, the image of the painting disappears and it kind of becomes camouflage, maybe better camouflage than the camouflage suits that we're wearing or and things like that. So in this piece, Thomas Moran, who also went on the Hayden expedition to document it, his daughter then later said that anytime they were hurting for money, well, it's time for father to make another painting of Green River. And so I think that's a perfect example of he made hundreds of these paintings. They exist in most major museums across the country, but really it was a capitalist venture in much the same way that all these outdoor companies who are trying to get you to have an experience, an authentic experience in the wilderness, they're really just trying to sell you stuff, right? But that artists are also implicated in that is something that we think is very important. Anyway, that's a little bit about our work. In this piece, we're layering of course, there's the photographs from William Henry Jackson, and then we have photographs that are stills from the television show alone. that all of the contestants are from the states that the Hayden expedition went to, which doesn't matter, except for it matters to us because we have a lot of, like Amie, there's some control freak tendencies maybe with every artist. And then the text comes from the show, so the stuff that is a more modern typeface is all direct quotes from the contestants complaining about how difficult it is. My stomach is gnawing at me, and I'm not even hungry. I just need to find a place where the water runs. Or talking about how they're lost and so on. And then the serif font all comes from the diaries of William Henry Jackson, where he's saying a lot of the same types of things. And it's interesting to see kind of how these people who are, lionized in that history, stars, they're just like us. They complain just as much as we do when they're outdoors. Yeah, so we have made this layered leaf shape in all of the work that's from the Bad Outdoorsman series, and it's based off of a ghillie suit, which is a type of like three-dimensional camo hunting suit. Ours are particularly bad. They don't really work to hide us in the outdoors, as you can tell in the video. As an aside, anytime we post about them on Instagram, hunters will tell us that they're bad, and we know they're bad. But thanks, hunters, for telling us. So we're interested in the kind of fake and real, and so, in these, of course, they do become reminiscent of feathers, and they move in the landscape, and they turn us into Muppets, and turn the painting, in this instance, into a Muppet, as opposed to if it were a real leaf where it becomes, a real leaf where it becomes more kind of maybe authentic.
That's another dimension to the whole
Yes.
installation.
And that's actually something we didn't know was going to happen when we first installed it. We didn't realize how much the body moving through the space was going to change the way that the work looks. And so, you don't have to be close to the work for it to all of a sudden it breathes and becomes more of a living thing almost than the painting might be. Thank you.
I'm not sidestepping talking about my work. I'll talk about my work and I'll get there, but I am going to start with a book recommendation that I just finished reading that I loved, and I will see if I can't bring that around to talking about my work. But I just finished reading All the Beauty in the World by Patrick Bringley, and I don't know if any of you have read this book, but it's a memoir, and it was written by this gentleman who spent 10 years as a museum guard at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's a very thoughtful memoir. And one of the things he talks about in the book that just really struck me so perfectly, just in terms of what I sort of try to get after and what I try to do in my paintings, is the difference between learning about a work of art and from a work of art. And those two different prepositions really change the game entirely. It's wonderful that you're all here tonight. We're doing about. Everyone's talking about their work. But it's quite another thing for you to come back to this space and be with any one of these pieces and learn from the work of art. That is the closest way you can get to the process of what it's like to make a work of art. Because an artist often talks about, I work from nature, I work from photography, I do drawings, direct observation, from this, from that. So if you think about your role as the viewer as trying to learn from the work of art, you very much parallel what is happening for the artist. And I often say, people ask me, oh, how do you begin? How do you, For me, it's a combination of like this book that's swirling around in my head, images that I have laying around in the studio, drawings I've done, old paintings that I haven't seen in years. I pull them out and I thought, oh, look at this. All these combinations, all these fragments, all these bits and pieces. And they're sort of all around me. And I think, oh, there's a painting in there. There's a painting in there. And then I begin. So for me, a painting is a great painting, not my painting's necessarily great, but any great work of art to me is a combination of intention plus discovery. If you're not discovering anything as a working artist while you're working on your work, then there's no discovery for the viewer. So it's got to always be that combination of intention plus discovery, and that lets you know that you are in the painting full strength. There's no holding back for a rainy day. You are working through it. Every single mark is a decision, and it's made based on the decision that you've made beforehand. Some of these paintings take months, some of them take years. Sometimes I'll start a painting, I get to a certain point in the middle of it, I got nowhere to go. There's nothing that's really telling me where to go next. There's no lift off in the painting. There's no engagement enough to tell me what the next step is. And so I have to put it away for a while. And then, you know, sometimes months, even years, come back out and I'll finish the painting. So they vary in time and how long they take. But the business of getting back to that about versus from, like how you learn from looking at art and paintings, to me, I think, the absolute goddess of art is nearness itself. It's that intimacy, it's that space that's created, that's activated between the viewer and the piece itself. And it's that space that I'm interested in being persuasive about. That's what I try to get every one of my paintings to do. I try to set the table so that when someone shows up to be at the table, there's enough stuff there for them to ruminate about and think it through. And so, it's that kind of intention that I begin a painting with and try to finish with. And I look for the discoveries along the way. Try to make it new, because let's face it, we're all just stuck with ourselves. We're just trying to find a different way home. Every new work of art is like you're just trying to find a different way home. And you set up the table in different ways. But I don't know. They're acrylic. What else do you want to know? Ask me a question. Well, this is, okay. Let me give you a little background and more about information. All of these paintings just came from an exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Atlanta. And the title of that show was called Runaway Universe. And Runaway Universe describes essentially these fleeting moments that we observe in terms of weather, twilight descending upon a landscape, the wind just before the rain. You can read the titles and they sort of give you the guideposts of all these sort of flashing moments that just happen very quickly. So there's these elements within nature, within weather conditions that I'm interested in that happen very quickly. You only get a few minutes to observe them, and then you try to extrapolate those bits and pieces into a complete work of art. The other thing the title Runaway Universe has to do with is just the times that we are living in. I did a big interview, and it's on my website if you want to read about it, but one of the questions was, is it about the cosmic? No, it's about, the speed in which our environment is rapidly changing. It's the speed in which our government is rapidly changing and the world that we can hardly catch up in. So Runaway Universe is not only about what I'm looking at and what I'm painting, but how I'm feeling. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way now. So this painting entitled Planet has this sort of like, where is the sun? Is this the sun? Is that the sun? It's the notion of the planet is the painting itself. And it doesn't have to make sense in a sort of literal way, but it made sense in a pictorial way. I walk my dog every day. And we do live close by a nature preserve, so I get to observe that and see that through the seasons. But I'm not a gardener. I have a very ordinary backyard. And I sometimes read poetry. I don't read poetry every day, let's put it that way. But yeah, I think they are trying to be persuasive, and I think they try to get the viewer into them in a variety of ways. And someone also asked me about, cinematic. There's some light effects that are cinematic, and I use everything. I use everything I can do to persuade you to look at the painting. I feel like that's my job, to get you to look at this as long as possible so that the messages get delivered. But it is a way of, it's a way of engaging with the world that makes the most sense to me. And I'm still, as long as I've been painting now, it's been, a 5-decade career. I remember to this day, when I was 14 years old, going to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts and going to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum by myself, because that was back in the day when you could have whole museums entirely to yourself. And you could engage with the painting, and you could imbibe by the painting. You could take a seat and really live with that painting, and they were a source of comfort and solace and all of that. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to make the thing that makes me feel like this, And you're with that painting, and you're feeling this sensation. It's like an activation that comes over you. And I just remember thinking, I want to make the thing that makes me feel like this. And then I started painting. I asked for oil paints for Christmas,
So why acrylic?
Oh, I'm allergic to oil paints. Terribly. I mean, I stopped painting in oils in 1978. If you were to give me oil paints today, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't know. Couldn't do it. So I've been, no. Oh God, yes. And back in 1978, acrylic paints were like glue. They were horrible, horrible, horrible things. So yes, you had to really work through it. Now, of course, they're pretty grand. But all I use is acrylic paint and water. There are no glazes, there are no mediums, there's nothing. It's just water, brush, paint. So that's,
Do you have to have a ladder?
I do. And I do. But my husband made me a stand with a railing so I could lean back a little and not fall. Yeah, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep making the big ones, but we'll see. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. Thanks to all the many people that make this exhibition happen. I'm going to talk about the work that you see here on the wall, and this work here on the pedestal, and the work there on the wall. My name's Althea Murphy-Price, and I would describe myself and my art practice as engaged in this expanded field of printmaking. I am someone that finds inspiration in both the object, the material, and the surface. And in that dialogue, I'm looking to create or trigger maybe a natural instinct towards touch, because I think touch is something that humanizes us, and it's also the first step in seeking understanding. So I think about that sort of thing a lot. I heavily rely on symbolism in my work through either the images that I reference or the objects that I use, and as well as the materials that I use. And I rely on that symbolism to create form connections really with myself personally, and myself also in this expanded sense of personhood as woman and also as a Black person. And so a lot of the times the materials you see, the objects that you see are in some ways they're referencing this kind of personal relationship or cultural relationship I have to those images. The pieces that are here and here are entirely created from 3D printing. So it's 3D printed plastic. That's an intentional choice. 3D printing, for me, it's the language of industry, right? It's the language of fabrication. And so it's one of the things that sparked my interest in pursuing 3D printing, because I think that a lot of our sense of who we are as society and individuals is heavily influenced by consumerist culture in ways that we don't always recognize or talk about. So that's the reason in the choice of the material. and both of this piece and this piece, they consist of several different components. So they're all made from several different small pieces, then put together. All of these small pieces on average in creating take about between they're like 6 to 15 hour print time periods, spans. So in this piece here, Beneath and Buried, there consists of several hundreds of combinations of either bobby pins, clips, scissors, screws, other types of fasteners, as well as other types of tools. And in this piece, of course, you see also these false body parts and these package bows on this display-like rack. All of the objects that are in both of these pieces are, in terms of process, are rendered in CAD software, so they're 3D modeled. And these are 3D models either that were either acquired or scans. So scans of the object or scans of the body, which there's either that or use of the scans of my body as well for this work. The first iteration of this piece, actually, the beginning of this piece, I might say, was exhibited at the Atlanta Contemporary, which was a much more small and narrow piece that was kind of the first spark of inspiration for this work, which was initially inspired by Frank Wilson's writing on Afro-pessimism. And at the time in reading this, I was really captivated by his depiction of a mental state in which Black people are essential to society and they're integral to society, but they're always kept separate from it. And for me, that like visual was one of the ground, right? Was one of being beneath. And from this reading, I kind of started to look back and a little bit more critically, a little more skeptically at the things around me, including the things like these common everyday tools and objects that I use all the time or that I rely on all the time, with somewhat of some kind of skepticism that maybe these are exactly the culprits of some of what has brought me to my own mental state, right? So these are objects that are intended to have a sense of both this fertility, but also maybe caution, right? Suggest caution. This piece of valuables behind me, these body parts, these false body parts on this display rack. Gosh, this piece consists of several different parts as well. And this is a piece that like meant to happen a long time, it's like it wanted to exist for a long time. I'm thinking Liz Gilbert wrote a book. Some of you might know of this book. This is like the author of Eat, Love, Pray, wrote this book called Big Magic. And in that, she talks about, which I love, and I think about this oftentimes, but she talks about creative ideas as these kind of divine or these non-physical entities that are looking for a human host, right? And so the thought that this muse, I might say, has been coming to me for a long time to work with the body, to use imagery of the body, because I think about the body in nearly all of my work, but to use it in a different way. And so this piece is a kind of long time coming. Both of these pieces are the largest pieces that I've created to date, and in 3D printing for sure. And yeah, and I think that's all. I think I'm going to stop there. So, any questions?
What is the material you use for the 3D?
So all of the 3D is in essence, generally a polymer plastic, generally put. What is that in comparison? We might think of like the water bottle. It's similar to that type of plastic that is able to render kind of a clear, there's so many different types of plastic, but that kind of clarity. So it's flexible, but it's also really rigid, and once it's set, it's really durable, really hard.
And those are several pieces installed in your grid.
Right. So all of the pieces on here are, they are they're installed on the grid, but they're all printed separately, right? And a number of them have to be printed in parts also, right?
Recycle or biodegradable if that was the case.
Yeah, they say that, but I think that I was looking this up. I think they'd still take something like 200 years or something like that to break down. Yeah, right. But that's supposed to be the incentive in using the polyacrylic plastic that I'm using, which is like just shorthand as PLA, right? Like, is that it will break down. But you know, the reality of these things is like, I don't know how truthful that is, right? So I wanted for this work, I wanted there to be some kind of transparency or translucency. I wanted there to be some sort of fleshy reference to this, but definitely still very artificial, and that's important to me. And so, to my surprise, my choice in color also created a metallic, right? But it wasn't actually originally intended to be metallic. I thought the execution of this would be more like a peachy, brownish, peachy, transparent color. But in fact, I got this like brilliant, like kind of, I think of like luster, I think about like hair terms, but out of this material. And actually, and a lot of that has to do with then realizing and learning from the work that how I chose to use the 3D printer and the direction and the path that it would create the forms then generates the type of effect, right? So it's largely the direction of which that they are, in 3D printing, these objects are kind of built in stacks and in layers, right? So it's the direction of that layering that allows it to reflect light the way that it's doing here.
There's a lot of tonal variations within this color. When you get up kind of close to it, you look at it, and the way the light refracts off of it. It's really extraordinary.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Could you talk about the use of the grid that is really prevalent in all of these works?
Yeah. The grid is, I find its origins in a couple of things. It's like, I feel like for me in just method and process, it was somehow, I see it and I see it and I see it again. I see it in the virtual space in my CAD software. It's what grounds you. It's the only thing that grounds you, in fact. That space is infinite. And it's the one sense of kind of locator for above and below. It is, I think, a result or patterning that happens in replication, right? So seeing and predominantly I'm working with squares, right? So this like repeat, this is a series of 9-inch squares in essence, put together and put together and put together. So it's like I see it again. And then in this case, in this like series of works, I think we use these like systems of order because they can disappear, and this also are like kind of a form of like structure and system that is like efficient and works, but also is kind of creates its own limits, right? And so that's how I think about it in this context of as like display. Yeah.
It also works as metaphor too, doesn't it? Yeah.
Right.
Because the structure of society, the structure that
one is rigid, one is a box.
we keep being stuffed into,
Right, absolutely, yeah. And also then in like my 2D and my printed work, and this is screen printed work here on the wall. This is where really my interest in 3D printing was like first explored was through printmaking. And in printmaking here, I'm using screen printing, I'm using the stencil and building layers of ink. So it's like layers of ink, one stacked upon another. And I found myself here as well, like using and thinking about the grid as serving as a gateway in a way, or a form of framework to work within. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you.